Hey everybody, this is Dan Healy. My username is OnlyTwentyCharacters on Roblox, and I'm here to give you guys another Games Team tutorial. This one is an introduction to basic scripting in Lua. This tutorial is going to cover just the basics of scripting. We're going to talk about what scripting is, how to do it, and we're going to learn some important programming concepts along the way. So let's get started. Scripting is writing a sequence of instructions or code for a computer to then run or execute. Now, because we're talking to a computer, the sequence of instructions have to be very specific, very exact. Even something as a single character wrong, a typo, can cause your script to error out and sometimes crash. Let me show you an example of what I mean, except for the crashing part. Hopefully we're not going to crash it. Let's say I want to add two numbers. I would think to say add 2 and 3. But that's not how we do it. Writing code is all about knowing the syntax of the language that you're writing in. For Lua, to add two things together, we write the left thing and the right thing with a plus sign between them. Pretty simple. Now if we press enter on this, we get another error. That's because we're not doing anything with this value. If we want to actually show the value, we have to say print. This means show me whatever's in these parentheses. So if I say print 4, it shows me 4. If I say print 2 plus 3, it shows me 5. We can print any number of things, from numbers to text enclosed in quotes, like hello world. Hello world. And we can even print objects and their properties. By objects, I mean the things in the Explorer over here. In the Explorer, we can see everything that's in the game. Quite literally. There's a hidden object here called game that all of these are under. That means workspace, players, lighting, all of these are under a thing called game. Just like how terrain, camera, and baseplate are under this thing called workspace. So what are each of these things? Workspace usually holds the 3D objects that you see in a game or place, like this baseplate here, or parts, or even scripts that are running. Most scripts that are running you can find in the workspace. Players holds the players when they connect to the game. Lighting holds values that you can change related to lighting, like the time of day, and many of these other objects have different functions in the game that maybe we'll talk about in a later tutorial. For now, it's important to just know that objects have a specific place in this hierarchy of objects, and it all starts with game. Let me show you what I mean. If I want to print the color of the baseplate, I can't just say print baseplate color. I have to say print the brick color property of the baseplate. But even that's not enough. I need to say exactly which baseplate I'm talking about. There could be any number of baseplates. To specify exactly the right object, I say print game.workspace.baseplate. This means print the baseplate that's in the workspace that's in game. Exactly this baseplate specifically. Now if I want to see the property brick color printed out, I have to add dot brick color and press enter. And there we see dark stone gray. If I change the property, we see that printing it out gives us a different result, bright green. We can do this for any object we see in the Explorer and any property that it has. For instance, game.players.numPlayers lets us see the number of players that are connected to the game. Right now it's 0. That'd be a little freaky if there were someone in here. I can even print things that I can't see, like properties of game. If I print game.name, we get place1, which is actually the name of this file. If I saved it, it would show me whatever I saved the file name as right here. Now the command bar is great for doing simple one-line commands, but it won't let me change anything when I'm running the game. For that, I need script objects. To create a script object, we do it in the same way as we do with any other object in Roblox. We open up basic objects and drag it into the play area. Now under script, we see a lot of the same properties that other objects have, like name, parent. There's actually another property we can't see here called source. To see it, we double click on the script and we see print hello world. Now we're inside the script. This is the code or set of instructions that make up this script. It says print hello world, but we don't actually see it in the output. That's because the script isn't running. This script will only run when the game runs. To run the game, we do tools, test, play solo, or we can press F6 as a shortcut. And we see down here at the bottom in the output, hello world. So now we know how to test our scripts. Now I want to introduce three very important programming concepts. Variables, which hold values, functions, which do things, and blocks, which are groupings of code. We'll talk more about that later. First, variables. Variables are things that hold values. Think of them as a drawer that you can put stuff in. So if I want to create a new variable, I say local, followed by the name of the variable, my variable. Now you'll notice I didn't put any spaces in my variable. That's because variable names can't have spaces in them. Otherwise the computer won't be able to tell how many variables we have here. Maybe there's a variable my, maybe there's a variable. It gets confused. Just know that you can't put spaces in variable names. I usually name my variables with capital letters at the start. This helps me put different words next to each other and see them easier. But you can name it whatever you want. Now we have the variable my variable, but it's empty. It's like an empty drawer. There's no value. If I want to add a value, I say equals 4. Now my variable holds the value 4. My variable, that's not very descriptive. How about yeah, actually it's kind of too long. Maybe there we go. Wait, there we go. Yeah. Now if we want to see the value of this variable, we can type print and then the variable name. And we press F6. And we should, hopefully, see 2. Good. The world is right today. And I have my back cloak. Now you might be wondering, what would happen if we printed this before we gave it a value? That's a good question. You're really smart. Let's try it. And we see it prints the value nil. What does that mean? Well, in Lua, nil means nothing. It's a special type of value that means there's nothing here, or the variable doesn't exist. Think of it as like an empty drawer. I should point out there are different types of variables. To see what type a variable is, we can use the type command. Type, and then in parentheses, the thing we want to check the type of. So say 4. Now if I just do this, it does nothing. Because I get the type of 4, and then I throw that type away, and I never get to see it. We have to remember to type print, and then the thing that we want to show. So we want to see the type of 4. What is 4's type? It's a number. Surprise, surprise. What about text in quotes? Like pizza. String. String is the official name for whenever we have text in quotes. Pizza. I'm hungry. Alright, back to the script. Now let's talk about functions. Functions, as I said before, are how you do things. You're actually already semi-familiar with this topic. The commands we were using before, print and type, are both functions that are built into Roblox Lua. When we say print human arm count, which is 2, that was close, we're doing what's called calling a function. We're calling the function print and giving it human arm count, which happens to be 2 today. We can also create our own functions in Lua. We do this in a similar way to how we create variables. First we type local, and then we type function and then the name of the function. How about ghostify? After this, we type parentheses and end. Anything between the parentheses and the end is called the body of the function. This is the sequence of commands that will be executed when this function is called. So ghostify is going to take an object and make it semi-transparent. Well, how can we do this? Let's look at what we have here. The base plate has a transparency property. Now I happen to know that transparency goes from 0 to 1, where 0 is not transparent at all, or completely opaque, and 1 is 100% transparent. So let's make our function change the transparency of something to 0.5. So first I need to get that something. To get something in a function that we can use within the body of the function, we need to have it in the parentheses at the top. So ghostify is going to change a part. So let's just call it part. This is the name that will be referring to this variable for the rest of the function. Now we need to change part's transparency to 0.5. How do we do that? In the same way that we assign to variables. First we say part dot transparency, and then we say equals 0.5. We're assigning 0.5 to the part's transparency property. Now we have our function, although we're not quite done with it yet. The function is complete, but we haven't ever called it, so nothing will happen. Let's call it on a part. We'll call it on the base plate. But remember, we can't just do base plate. We have to do game.workspace.baseplate to say exactly what baseplate where. Alright, let's try it out. Anybody feeling ghosty? No? Okay. And here we see that our base plate is half transparent and kind of a little bit blue. I think it's the skybox. Yeah. Alrighty. So now we know how to create and call a function that takes in a single thing and does something to it. The thing it takes in is called a parameter. Functions can actually have multiple parameters. Let me show you. Local function, and we'll create another function called add, and then we're going to take in 2 parameters, which we'll call A and B. Now this function is going to take A and B and add them up. Simple enough. A plus B. Well, that's an error. And why is that an error? It's because we're not doing anything with it again. We want to take this result and give it back after the function is called. To do this giving back, we type the word return. And we see it's a special word, just like local, function, end. All of these are called keywords. Now what this means is when we call add by saying add 4, 5, now we're passing in the values 4 and 5, we're going to get this answer back, which means this part that I've selected here is basically going to turn into that value. And what that means is we can then print it by saying print add 4, 5, just like we did with type earlier, or we can actually assign it to a variable by saying local animal arm count equals add 4 and 5. That's a lot of arms. And we can see if we print it, we can see just how many arms this monstrosity has. And we see 9. Good. My output is getting a little bit messy with all these prints. So I'm going to show you a cool technique called commenting. Commenting is a way of adding notes to your code. You do it by going to the end of a line and typing 2 dashes followed by your comment. So, gee whiz. That's a lot of arms. Another thing you can do with this is actually take lines of code and do what's called commenting it out. We've turned this line of code into a comment. Comments are skipped over when the script is being executed. These are just notes for the reader, which maybe is you later on and when you're trying to figure out what your code is doing, or maybe you're sharing with someone else and it's really helpful for that person to read through your comments and figure out what's happening. It's generally a way of telling people what this section of code is doing, or funny comments on the side. So let's go ahead and comment out these print statements. Now we've created a couple functions, one which takes in a single parameter and changes its transparency to 0.5, and another function which takes in 2 parameters and gives us back the sum of those two. Alright, now it's time to talk about my favorite part, blocks. Woo. So we know blocks are groupings of instructions, but what does that mean? Well, there's actually several different kinds of blocks, one of which you've already seen. That's right, functions are a kind of block. Each of these functions is its own block. In ROBLOX Studio's script editor, it's easy to see where a block begins because it puts a little arrow to the left of the first line. Blocks will always start on these arrows and end at end. Another way you can tell is if the code is indented. Usually that means there's a block there. Now before we talk about the next kind of block, I want to introduce a new type of value. Just like numbers and strings, Booleans are another type of value. Booleans are one of the simplest values because they can only be either true or false. And that's important for the next block, the conditional. Conditionals choose between 2 different blocks to execute. They decide which block to execute based on this Boolean. So based on that condition, whether the Boolean is true or false, it'll either execute the first set of instructions or the second. Conditionals are often called if statements because of how they're written. To write a new conditional, we start with if, followed by the Boolean we want to test. So for right now, we'll just put true, followed by the 2 blocks. The first block starts with then, and then we have the body of the block. And the second block starts with else, and then we have the body of that block. And it all ends with end. Depending on this Boolean, this conditional will either print A or B. One interesting thing about conditionals is that this second part isn't actually necessary. It's completely optional. This is useful because sometimes we only want to do something if a value is true. So let's try a real example. We're going to write if, followed by the condition we want to test. Let's say if animal arm count is greater than 2, then we print animal wins. Otherwise, print human wins. Now we didn't write true or false here explicitly, but we did write something that will turn into a true or false. By using the mathematical symbol greater than, we're asking the computer to take whatever value is in this variable, check if it is more than 2, and then do one block or the other based on that. So if animal arm count is more than 2, it'll print animal wins, but if animal arm count is less than or equal to 2, it'll print human wins. Let's try it out. And then we see that in this case, animal wins. That's because animal arm count was set to 9. 9 is greater than 2, so it does the first block. Now if I change the number of arms to a different sum, we see that Human wins. Victory. Now let's talk about another flavor of block. This one's called a for loop. It's useful for when you want to execute a sequence of instructions multiple times. Let's say I want to print something 3 times. To write a for loop, we start with for, another special keyword, and then we have a special counting variable, which is almost always called I. After this, we say equals 1, which is where the counting variable will start at, comma 3, which is where the counting variable will end at. Then we write do, and then the body of the for loop, and then end. This for loop will run 3 times. Each time, the counting variable I will be incremented, or increased by 1. So if we print this, we see the first time I is equal to 1, the second time I is 2, and the third time I is 3. Now these values don't have to be explicit numbers. Just like in the if statement, we can use variables too. So I'm going to take human arm count and say print arm number, comma I. This will print the arm number followed by the counting variable with a nice space in between them. Both arms reporting for duty. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did. I strongly encourage you guys to try these things out on your own if you're not already, and to check out some of the many other resources available on scripting. One of which is in the Help menu under Object Browser. This is where you can see all of the different functions and properties of all the different Roblox objects. Another great resource is the wiki. If you press F1 from Studio, it takes you to the Roblox wiki page, where on the left there's links specifically for scripting, including many tutorials, as well as all of the different Roblox objects with pictures, descriptions, and again, all of the functions and properties. So definitely check those things out. If you have any questions or would like to give feedback on this or any of the other video tutorials, please post a comment below or send us a PM. My username is OnlyTwentyCharacters. Let us know, what are you working on? Did you enjoy these videos? If so, what do you want to learn next? Thanks for watching.